Okay, it's 5:30, July 18th, 2024. We're calling the meeting of Planning and Zoning Board for the Village of Tequesta to order. Meg, would you take roll call, please?
Yes. Leslie Dasher.
Here.
Teresa Maggio.
Here.
Elizabeth Shower.
Yes, here.
Sherry Ambrose.
Here.
Jean McEldowney.
Here.
Maria Sphiri.
Here.
Marco Valdez.
Here.
Jared Gaylord.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and we all have agenda?
Mhm.
Is everything okay? Is everything okay? And can we
I'll
get-
make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And the meeting minutes for the previous meeting,
For June 20th.
yes, and.
I would like,
There were some corrections.
There is a correction. Marco Valdez, alternate number 2, was here,
Yes.
and it's not noted. And then Jared Gaylord came in later,
Mhm.
and that isn't notated either.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and Chair Dasher,
Sherry was not here.
and yeah, Chair Dasher gave us a few updates, so we've already uploaded them on the website. It's just,
Okay.
you're probably not seeing them in the agenda you got, but I think
Okay.
we've already taken care of them, but appreciate that. It's a software glitch.
Okay.
I'll make a motion then to approve the minutes for June 20th, 2024.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, we'll move on to our only agenda item, which is SPM 3-24. And, I'm sorry,
Was that 3-24?
Yeah.
3-24, yes. Okay, and Mr. Stephanos, if you'd like to come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
And Chair, I'd like to take a moment and swear in
Yes.
the applicant for this item. If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you swear or affirm under penalties of perjury and the laws of the state of Florida to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Very good. Members of the board, have you, if you've had any ex parte communications with the applicant or have conducted any site visits regarding this application, I'd ask that you disclose it at this time.
We all drive by it.
Yes,
Yeah, we all drive
did
by
drive
it.
by, yes.
We did see.
Okay,
It's like going to Publix.
Yeah,
very
yeah.
good. Thank you so much.
Okay, if you can state your name and address for the record,
My name is
please.
Frank Daniele. I live at 100 Southwest Peacock Boulevard in Port St. Lucie.
Oh.
I'm the Director of Marketing for Sozo Group LLC, and I'm speaking on behalf of Glenn Stephanos, who's the owner of the building at 307
Oh, okay.
Tequesta Drive.
Okay.
Could you speak into the microphone,
Yes, I
please?
can.
Thank you.
Yes. I'd like to
Okay.
start by saying good evening to the board.
Oh,
Good
is
morning
that
to the front.
It's, I don't think that microphone is working.
I don't either.
I'll speak louder.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm hard of hearing, so I
I
apologize.
understand, me too. As it says, we're just seeking a minor site plan modification, just to paint the building and to also paint the concrete sign on the corner that everybody has to see when they're driving in from the east side. And our feeling is that, you know, from the east side, when you cross Tequesta and Cypress, that really feels like where you're entering Tequesta. And right now, we have a building that's structurally solid, but a tired out exterior. And we want to upgrade it, and we look very much into probably the most popular and then sedate, you know, colors that we think would blend in very well and give a good look to the building.
Okay. Okay, and do you have any questions? Does the board have any questions?
But if I can interrupt, Meg was going to give a quick presentation as well.
Oh, I see, okay.
Frank was kind enough to bring in some extras.
Yeah, when you print things, the colors don't always look the same. They look a little darker on the print, so I've got some
Oh,
swatches
okay,
from
okay.
Sherwin-Williams, and I attached them to the back. I'm sorry I don't have a folder for everybody.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine.
So board, thank you for allowing me to present 307 Tequesta Drive. This is a minor site plan modification located at the corner of Tequesta Drive and Cypress. This building currently has a yellow facade with a green roof. The applicant is looking to improve the aesthetic by painting the building Sherwin-Williams Panda White and the roof with Sherwin-Williams iron ore. This will require a minor site plan modification per section 2253, which enables the Planning and Zoning Board to grant final approval on aesthetic modifications to exterior building color or finish when not accompanied by any other site plan modification. Here we have an aerial photograph of the proposed location. You can see Tequesta Drive to the south and Cypress to the east. Here are your current conditions. If you were on Cypress Drive, this is what you would see looking to the west, and the other two are from the vantage point of Tequesta Drive. Here are the proposed paint colors. It's a nice rendering that was provided to us. Again, you have Cypress Drive, and then the bottom two are going to be Tequesta. Criteria for review, the board is going to be looking at harmony with other buildings, harmony with surroundings, the facades, method of harmonious design, inappropriate building styles, garish design, exterior forms, and use of symbolic colors, exterior storage, and display of merchandise. So for the harmonious design, this is your surrounding sites. On the bottom right here, we have 307 Tequesta Drive. To the north, we have the Beach House Vet, and then to the west is Blair House Condo. The Beach House Vet has a similar aesthetic as what you see before you being proposed. It's got a dark roof with a light facade. And then Blair House Condo actually faces Willow Road. So the southern property line is very lushly landscaped. If you were coming down Tequesta Drive, this is what you would see immediately adjacent to 307. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Okay, does the board have any questions?
Quick question.
Jean?
Is that asphalt, the roof?
That is a tile, right, Glenn?
It doesn't
Oh,
look
it-
like tile, it looks like asphalt.
Yeah, it looks like asphalt, but it's tile.
It does look like tile.
Well,
It's not asphalt,
It's a,
it's pitched, it's a, a regular flat roof pitch. Like,
Yeah, it's
and
the
then
old,
it's a green mansard around the perimeter of it, but the flat roof is
Flat roof, and the mansard is currently green.
green.
Is that being replaced?
No.
It's just painted, yeah.
You're gonna
Painting.
paint
The
it.
green, yeah.
that'll be the iron ore color.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it just looks like, this close-up looks like asphalt, and I just was
Mhm.
wondering how you
No, yeah.
were painting.
I like it, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
It's really
Very
a
nice.
great
Very,
combination.
very nice.
Thank you.
Color.
Very popular.
Yeah.
The multi-million-dollar homes.
And not trendy, it'll look good for a
Yeah.
long time.
Mhm. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, are there public comments? Meg, do we have any public comments?
No, not for this item.
Okay, and, anything else?
No further comment?
Okay, I guess the only thing I have to say is it looks very nice, looks fresh, clean, and great. I would ask that maybe for the future, if maybe you might spruce up the landscaping a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Freshen up the landscaping.
We're going to.
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll have to submit that. We have
Yes.
to fix the irrigation.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, but we're gonna do it. We'll submit that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Near
it-
future.
Yes,
Well,
definitely.
your new colors will make the
Oh,
landscaping
right.
look worse, so it'd be
Definitely.
nice to see that in the future, so.
well,
okay.
you mentioned that in your permit, that you were going to be coming back.
Yes.
Yes.
Good, good, okay. Okay, if there's no other, we're closing public comment, and, I guess
I'll
we'll-
make a motion to approve SPM 3-24.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
gentlemen.
That's great. Thanks, Nick.
You're very welcome.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we can adjourn. Okay. Okay, a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned. Okay, and we'll go around to the next meeting, and it is 5:39, July 18th, 2024. We will open the meeting for the local planning agency of the Village of Tequesta. Meg, will you take roll call, please?
Of course. Leslie Dasher,
Here?
Teresa Maggio,
Here.
Elizabeth Shower,
Here.
Sherry Ambrose,
Here.
Jean McEldowney,
Here.
Marie Safari, Marco Valdez, Jared Gaylord.
Okay, and has everybody had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. The last month's meeting minutes and my,
Well, we need to address that Marco was here and that Jared was, he was here. He was a little late. No, he was on time for this one. He was late for the first
for the,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
She's a stickler.
We do read these things.
Okay, was that also
Yeah.
corrected on the?
Meg did correct those as well.
Yes, we adjusted the minutes after you brought
Otherwise,
it to
I'll
our
make a
attention.
motion to approve the minutes with the corrections.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. Okay, we'll move on to our only agenda item, ordinance 808-24, living shorelines, bulkheads, seawalls, and fill. And Jay, are you presenting this?
I am. I think Dylan's going to read the ordinance first.
Okay.
Chair, ordinance number 08-24 is an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending Chapter 76 Waterway Control, creating an entirely new Article 4 entitled Bulkheads and Seawalls, and an entirely new Article 5 entitled Fill Permits, which new articles are intended to limit the use of bulkheads and seawalls in favor of promoting living shorelines and regulate the use of fill waterward of adjacent property lines, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 76 Waterway Control shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and for other purposes. This is a fairly comprehensive living shorelines ordinance, and I'm going to pass it over to Jay to explain it.
Great. Yep, so the Village Council tasked staff with creating a living shorelines ordinance. It's actually been workshopped now. There's an initial workshop last summer with previous staff. And then when I came on, I've been workshopping it for some time. We had a meeting with the Environmental Advisory Committee in December 2023, and then a follow-up meeting with the Village Council in January of 2024. And from those meetings, we created kind of a draft ordinance and then brought that back to the EAC again last Wednesday. And so it's pretty comprehensive. When I started out, the idea was to look at living shorelines, but then as I kind of looked at the code, I realized that there's a lot of things that were missing in our code that a lot of other cities have. So what we did is we really used Jupiter as the inspiration for the living shoreline side of things, and the code that we created is pretty similar to that. But then from my past experience and from the building officials' past experience at North Palm Beach, where there is a lot of canals, waterways, and lagoons, we kind of crafted some seawall regulations and fill permit regulations based on what they have. So a lot of what we did, Tom Bradford, who's the former chair of the EAC, at the EAC meeting last week, basically said, well, this is a great example of things that are in our comprehensive plan getting put into our land development code, right? So there's some times where we have things in our comprehensive plan that are these aspirational goals that don't really make their way into the actual code. So he said this is a pretty good example of that, and I'll show you later how much we have that's kind of related to the comprehensive plan. But first, I'll give you just a little bit of a brief introduction on living shorelines. I went to a seminar, I think it was in the wintertime, and got a few good slides about what living shorelines actually are. It's basically, it's a shoreline management practice that provides erosion control benefits, protects, restores, and enhances natural shoreline habitat, and maintains coastal processes through strategic placement of plants, stones, sand fill, and other organic materials. So Jupiter's code is really focused on mangroves and on riprap to create the living shorelines. There's a lot of other methods that are creating oyster reefs, and there's a lot of other things that some places are doing, but rather than go completely rewrite things, we kind of try to keep it pretty similar to what Jupiter's is. Another thing is, what is shoreline armoring? So that's called hard infrastructure. So seawalls, bulkheads, retaining walls that are used to separate land and water. Approximately 14% of the U.S. coastline has been armored, However, as you can see here, it's about somewhere between 50 and 75% in Palm Beach County. Pretty substantial number. I've got another slide later that will show you kind of what it looks like in the Loxahatchee River. Problems with shoreline armoring: it creates a fixed point in relation to rising sea levels and coastal flooding. So this is a challenge for resiliency, which I think we've worked to address later in the code. I'll explain this a little bit more. There's a loss of habitat due to an abrupt transition from shoreline to water, so you're not really having any kind of sea life along the actual shoreline itself. And then, of course, seawalls will eventually fail, and there's a high cost to repair or replace them. At the seminar I went to, they talked about how when you use living shorelines techniques to protect seawalls and bulkheads, they typically survive much longer because they're getting less wave action and less impact. Another one on living shorelines, so it protects. It improves stability and it reduces erosion. It's a less expensive and sustainable option to traditional seawalls. I have a slide that will show you later that just exactly how much it's more affordable than a traditional seawall. It provides essential habitat for fish and other wildlife. It improves water clarity because it can filter stormwater runoff. As you know, mangroves do a great job at that. It creates feeding areas for wading birds and encourages seagrass growth and reduces sediments in water. So here's some different shoreline types. So there's a natural shoreline, kind of a riprap one, and a seawall. So as you can see right there, just how a seawall will kind of prohibit sea life at the actual shoreline itself. Another example of something that's no living shoreline, one that's kind of got a partial living shoreline with riprap and some mangrove, and then a full-on living shoreline that's fully mangrove. This is a slide that just shows how living shorelines support resilient communities. Here's a cost comparison. So this is by the city of Fort Lauderdale. They've actually got quite a bit of material out there about living shorelines. As you know, they've probably have the most canals in Florida. They're certainly up there. So it shows at the top there that the cost of a living shoreline in comparison to a seawall is more affordable in all of those examples: shallow water, deep water, high wake, low wake areas. So in terms of the Tequesta Code, we do not currently have any regulations regarding bulkhead and seawall construction or the placement of fill on waterward of property lines. So it's difficult and challenging for our building department to regulate the construction of bulkheads and seawalls without having defined regulations. In 2015, the town of Jupiter adopted new regulations that required some elements of living shorelines to be installed when bulkheads or seawalls are replaced. Really important to point out that it does not require anything to be done to existing bulkheads, revetments, or natural shorelines. It simply requires mangroves or riprap to be installed when a new project is being constructed or there's substantial replacement of an existing one. So this does not impact anyone that has an existing seawall. We're not going to come in and say you've got to do anything. Also of note, in 2019, the Village of North Palm Beach underwent an extensive rewrite of its bulkhead and seawall code with the assistance of a local coastal engineer, Alec Gerwig and Associates. I was working there at the time, and it's interesting. So we actually went out and hired Alan Gerwig because he's local to the area. He knows the area, but he was I think in Wellington, so he's not a person that was going to be doing a lot of projects there. Like Charlie Eisenmenger is a really well-known local coastal engineer. We wanted to kind of get an outside person that would be, kind of unbiased. And so I think he did a really good job of writing that. And so we used the Jupiter Code and in some instances that North Palm Beach Code that really they paid a fair amount of money for him to do a really good study. So we can kind of get that work for free.
Why not?
Yeah. So here's the Loxahatchee River, just showing how we share it with Jupiter. So it only makes sense to kind of mirror their code or at least be somewhat consistent to what they're doing or what they've already done. So I've got 7 different issues in the code. I'm going to kind of walk through each one. The first one is hardening the shorelines. So in our comp plan right now, it says that bulkheads and seawalls shall be permitted only to stabilize disturbed shorelines or to replace deteriorated existing bulkheads or seawalls. So this is saying that if you've got a natural shoreline, you're supposed to keep it that way. However, there's really nothing in our code about that because our code has nothing about bulkheads and seawalls. So the other policy there, 6.17, says that the village shall only consider hard structures such as seawalls only when other options are unavailable. So we basically codified this in the new code by saying that bulkheads and seawalls shall be permitted only to stabilize disturbed shorelines or replace deteriorated existing bulkheads and seawalls. And the second part there, we clarify that properties with natural shoreline shall attempt to utilize living shorelines techniques to stabilize shoreline in lieu of armoring with a bulkhead or seawall. And in order to do so, if they were to want to do so, they would have to apply to this board for a zoning variance. So everything in our waterways code, chapter 76, because it's in the residential zoning code, variances have to go to the PZB. I actually had originally drafted this to say that the building official and myself could, if we consented, we could agree to allow them to armor that natural shoreline or riprap with a seawall. However, the EAC, I think, really did a good job by pointing out that it's kind of a tough thing for us to grant. Even Marie called me today and said, what's the definition of a disturbed shoreline? And the EAC asked the same question. It's really hard to define what that is. So the EAC and even myself kind of came to the conclusion that it probably makes sense just to make it be a zoning variance rather than be like a staff approval because it's very subjective and kind of arbitrary.
Well, then who's going to educate us on?
So we will still, you will still get a staff recommendation on those. So the building official or myself would say whether or not we support this or the zoning variance or not. The EAC did, come to think of it, they did want to clarify that the building official and community development director should provide a written recommendation. That was like Wednesday, and I updated this in like a day to get it on this agenda, so I forgot to put that in. But
Okay.
if you'd want to, that'd be a great addition to the
Yes.
code.
Yes.
Because then the building official particularly, they know construction techniques. I've learned a little bit of, I have like a high school level, they've got master's level in this stuff. So, also feel free to jump in and interrupt me anytime. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, don't worry when we get into the nooks and
Well,
crannies.
You can do it in the middle too, because there's a
Okay.
lot of stuff, so jump in anytime and interrupt me.
Okay, I do have a question about when a homeowner decides that, well, my shoreline's disturbed, I need a bulkhead or something, and they go to the building department and/or you, whichever, at that point, either department might just say, no, you don't qualify, so then it never hits the planning and zoning. It would only be if there's a possibility, but if the building department looks at it and they say, you didn't even try, then it wouldn't go any further.
That's a great question and great point. So a lot of times when it comes to zoning variance, people will do something that requires a zoning variance, and staff will say, you're welcome to apply for the zoning variance, but we don't think there's really anything backing the zoning variance. We wouldn't expect this to get approved.
Okay.
You're welcome to apply,
Okay,
right? Because
all
we
right.
can't prevent them from applying,
I
but we
see,
can
okay.
certainly, and especially if you codify that part where the building official or myself provide a recommendation, we could at that point even say, just a heads up, we don't think you have a valid case. We're going to recommend denial of the zoning variance.
Well, and-
We've all had hard times with variances.
Yes. Well,
We've
and-
spent many hours over variances.
And somebody would be viewing the site, and that's when they'd say, you didn't even try. So then we would have that history, that we would be given that history to look at, that the building official does not feel that does feel this person has more options, and then we would, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we would likely ask for a letter or some sort of analysis from a coastal engineer stating that there's severe erosion happening due to wave action or due to some unique circumstance, and that if, some excuse for why a living shoreline wouldn't work and why an armored shoreline would be necessary.
Okay.
Here's the slide I mentioned earlier. So this shows that we're, now this is not just Tequesta, this is Jupiter and unincorporated Palm Beach County too, but this is something Jupiter Inlet District did in 2013. We're 65% bulkhead, 14% rock, 21% natural. I believe it's still pretty similar to this, just from an eyeball. The other issue is establishing seawall and bulkhead setbacks. So again, we don't have any code, so we wanted to establish seawall and bulkhead setbacks. The code says that when seawalls and bulkheads are being replaced, more than 50% of the replacement cost. So this is basically what we define, and most codes define as like substantial construction. They would then have to meet these new standards. So somebody, if someone was doing a minor repair of their seawall and it was less than 50% of the cost to put in a new seawall, they wouldn't have to meet the new standards. But if they do have to meet them, the code says that new seawalls and bulkheads cannot be constructed beyond the rear property line. However, an existing seawall may be constructed or reconstructed 18 inches waterside of the property line. So Jupiter and North Palm Beach both allow replacement 18 inches waterside of the property line, and that's because when you replace a seawall, you have to replace it waterside. Just construction-wise, I don't know if I've ever seen it happen where someone takes one out and puts one in. It's just it's a mess if you try to. So because of that, you want to give them a little bit of leeway to build outside of it. And 18 inches is generally pretty negligible amount, so it's not making too much of an impact. And the code says that seawall cap shall extend no further than 3 feet from the wet face of the bulkhead. So people will sometimes, you want to have a little bit of a seawall cap where you can walk on it, but you also don't want it to be 10 feet wide. So people are putting up tables and chairs on it and expanding their property line.
I have, all right, the 3 feet, I'm looking for my notes, because I have a lot of questions on this whole thing. The 3 feet, how do you adhere it?
So when someone comes in to,
How do you adhere it to the wall? I mean, it's 3 feet out, here's the wall, it's 3 feet out. Okay, so you can't have it just sitting there, like it's gotta be, how are you gonna bolt it to,
there's construction techniques they can use to kind of cantilever it out 3 feet.
Do we need to be specific on how, 3 feet is kind of, to me, a lot of feet. It could be 2 feet, but but shouldn't we be specific? Because I have to start from the beginning, but shouldn't we just say to them how to adhere it to the wall?
Will there be engineering reports?
Wouldn't the wall have,
Yeah, but
the thickness of the
But in the
wall.
ordinance, you need to be specific.
So there's some stuff about construction techniques, and during the building permit process, the building department will look at anything to make sure it's structurally sound.
Okay.
So if there was some instance where it looked like it wasn't structurally stable on the underside of it, they would catch that. So it's 3 feet in North Palm Beach, and I don't recall there ever being issues
Okay.
with them, people being unable to do it
I
there.
thought 3 feet was like, okay, all right. I can't find, all right. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Issue number 3 is establishing seawall and bulkhead height. So this is really kind of a resiliency thing. So we have a few different policies in here which basically say that we shall increase community resiliency, to deal with the impacts of sea level rise, that we shall use strategies to increase community resilience and protect property infrastructure from the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, changes in rainfall, and extreme weather events. We shall utilize best practices and initiate mitigation strategies to reduce risk of flooding in coastal areas from high tide events, storm surge, etc. So when North Palm Beach did that code analysis, the engineer and staff looked at king tide level data. As everyone I think is probably aware, it seems like king tides have increased
Yes,
fairly substantially in the past few years. And then they also looked at sea level rise projections. I believe it was out to the year 2050 or so. So they were looking at future sea level rise basically until the end of the lifespan of seawalls. And so they use that to kind of establish appropriate minimum and maximum seawall heights. Some people will come in and they'll want to build massive seawalls. I've heard and seen examples of people wanting to build, wealthy people in South Florida and Miami, these huge seawalls. And then some people may want to build their seawall too low. So the analysis they did basically said that the minimum seawall cap should be about 4 feet, and that the maximum should be about 4.5 feet. That's in the X and X500, so the non-flood zones. And then in the special flood hazard area, which is the AE zone, I think it's roughly about 50% of our waterfront areas are AE zone, maybe a little more. Those areas can have a seawall cap an additional 6 feet higher, so up to 5 feet. So the findings from that study they did was basically that 4.5 feet in the non-flood zone area, 5 feet is an appropriate kind of maximum height, but that 4 feet is generally a good minimum to have. So then compatibility between properties. This is something that our building officials dealt with in the past. From his time in North Palm Beach, you've got a situation where people are building their bulkhead and seawall higher than their neighbor's property. So, what we did is there's some design criteria here. So you have to use the same material and type as as your seawall cap. So you can't build this beautiful seawall and then, make it look ugly on your neighbor's property. So it shall have a minimum finished appearance equivalent to or better than painted concrete stucco. Also, there can sometimes be erosion issues. So what we did is we said that seawall caps that are higher than their neighbor's property shall provide a drainage plan to demonstrate there's no sheet flow of water and no kind of major erosion issues. And in that case, the building official has some discretion to kind of work with them to make the properties a little bit more compatible, maybe grade-wise or with a retaining wall or some sort of construction technique. Issue number 5 is how do we actually incentivize or create living shorelines? So here's some examples. I think these are all really in kind of Jupiter area. Some riprap, and then some riprap and mangroves. So our housing policy says that we shall utilize management practices which will alleviate residential water pollution. We shall revise existing code provisions related to water quality, shoreline stabilization. That we shall cooperate with other agencies protecting the resources of Loxahatchee and Indian River Lagoon by participating in the development of estuarine policies that are consistent with present management. So of course with Jupiter already having living shorelines, this is kind of being a good neighbor with what Jupiter is doing. And then the last one says that we shall continue to provide for the protection of estuarine water quality and resources in our code of ordinances. So what we did here is really pretty much mirrored what's in the Jupiter code. I simplified it a little bit more. I know if you've looked at the way we drafted it, it's not the easiest read. But believe it or not, I simplified the way the Jupiter's was written. It was a little bit even funkier than the way I wrote it. So what we did is we said that when a new bulkhead is constructed or when an existing one is replaced, 100% of the bulkhead or seawall shall be faced with ripraps. Of course, that excludes a portion where a dock or pier goes out. Within 2 years of final inspection of a bulkhead, at least 10% of the shoreline shall be comprised of established mangroves. So the idea is that you line the shoreline with riprap, and then you, at the same time, are simultaneously planting mangroves, and there's a grow-in period, and that those are supposed to kind of take hold and grow over time. So within 2 years of construction of that bulkhead, you should have 10% of the shoreline as mangroves. If not, there's kind of a punitive section that basically says if you don't have 10% of it established, you have to plant 20% mangroves, right there on the spot.
I have a question about this.
Sure.
2-year permit period. So over the course of that 2 years, are there incremental inspections as the work is being done?
They're supposed to provide monitoring, pictures and monitoring updates. So, it's always tough to deal with projects after it's completed, but we do it somewhat on like vacation rentals. We do like annual inspections. So it's if this code is adopted, we would likely have to create like an Excel table that has every permit and, follow-up dates on it, just to make sure that we're kind of tracking it and that people are staying on top of it. But there is some reporting that they would have to do to us, and if they were to not follow that, we'd have to, we'd obviously reach out and work with them, but if we have to, we could always go through code enforcement. Also, properties that are designated on our shoreline exemption map, which is basically the few canals we have in the village, are exempt from installing riprap or mangroves. This is because they're generally pretty narrow, and people tend to line the seawall with their boats. Because of the narrowness, the seawall itself ends up becoming basically a dock. So it's very difficult and onerous for people to do living shorelines there. Jupiter's code does the exact same thing as well. I'll show you the map on the next page. Where this is something we took from Jupiter code, where riprap or mangroves will disturb existing seagrasses, or when another jurisdictional agency like the DEP or Army Corps denies a permit, riprap or mangroves would not be required. We don't want people to damage seagrasses, and of course, if Army Corps or DEP, who kind of can supersede us, say you can't do riprap or mangroves there, it's hard for us to require it as well. So that's in Jupiter code.
Just from like a timing perspective for the applicant or the property owner, would they need to go get their DEP or Army Corps permits first and then come to the village, or?
Yeah, they typically do, and it's a long period for them. If you're ever hearing about this, people will all the time, like the marine contractors, will blame things on the municipality, but it's really the DEP takes forever with the review. So they would have already gone to them and then come to us after the fact.
So they go to DEP first, then when they get the approval from DEP, they come to us.
Correct. Although, if people are doing things right, they'll go to both at the same time and say, hey, I'm designing this, I'm running it through DEP. I want to make sure that I can also get it approved by the village as well. So, doesn't always happen that way. I've seen instances where people go and they say, hey, this was approved by DEP, why isn't the municipality approving it? Sorry, we have different standards.
But wouldn't it be advisable for them to go to the DEP first, since it takes them longer to approve? Because in reading this, I have I spent like 7 hours on this ordinance. We need to put a time limit. Give them a year. You have like 2 years or 3 years. I'm like, that's too long. Let them do the hard part first. Let them go to DEP first if that's gonna take longer.
Yeah.
Then come to us, then you have a planning and zoning meeting, and then, that's a lot quicker, and then they can't make us the bad guy.
Yeah, no, and that's typically the way it's supposed to happen. It's just the marine contractor will sometimes it's a marine contractor just taking a long time to get a permit in, and they'll blame us when it's really the DEP that's holding it up. Right? So if someone has hired a marine contractor to do a seawall, the resident doesn't know who's holding the permit up. They just know it's being held up in a permit.
But
Right?
I think her point is, so if they're gonna go to DEP, right, they can still come to us and get your opinion without actually getting on the agenda, and that would
Yes.
be the right process.
Yes.
So I don't think anything in here means that they shouldn't go to the DEP first. They should just be engaging staff like,
Informally.
on a consultative basis. Yeah.
Yes.
But I would suggest that they do that. Why pay for all of this for us? And then, because I want to put a time limit on it. So if we approve it and it's still sitting at DEP and it takes them 6 months, they've already lost 6 months of a timeline where I'm saying, I want you to have 1 year from the time we approve the permit to get your job done. So they've lost 6 months because of DEP. So that's why I am suggesting they go to DEP first. Then after they get that, then they come, and then, as long as everybody approves it, you have 1 year. We need to.
Well, that is the typical process. So they go to their DEP permit before they come to us. Our building department won't approve something if it doesn't have that DEP permit first.
Right. So
All right.
right? So
they wouldn't have our approval.
they wouldn't have our approval yet. But I think what Sherry was saying is, so they even though they go to the DEP with their permit, they should check with the village first,
Well,
right? To make
check-
sure that what they're doing is
Is-
approvable,
Yes.
Right.
right?
Okay.
So for instance, you wouldn't want someone to come in, go to DEP, get a seawall that's approved with no riprap or mangroves on it, and then they come here and we say, oh, you need riprap and mangroves, and then they say, oh geez, well now we have to go back and modify our DEP permit, which will send it back in the queue. So, I mean, there's certainly an education component to it too. I mean,
Well,
we
yes.
need to get, when or if this passes, educate the community. If you're updating a bulkhead or seawall, come
Make
to the
sure that
village,
you
make sure
bring-
you're in compliance with the village
Yeah.
code before you even go to those state agencies.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's, you know, it's hard for us to know who's doing these things, because sometimes they'll just go to DEP without us, so we can't read minds and,
Well, I understand.
right,
yeah.
so.
So the 50% that you would need to, if you were going to do any work on your seawall, and you're saying if it's more than 50% of the cost of doing an entire seawall,
Mhm.
of course, all the seawalls are contiguous,
Yeah,
so I don't know where that information comes from.
it would be,
Um,
it would be the replacement costs on your property.
Just property line to property line.
Yes, so in your instance with your
And
condo, we
same
wouldn't
thing,
count, we
yeah.
wouldn't count the adjacent condos, just your
No.
property. And that would typically be based on, you know, the linear foot, what the cost is on an average for a linear foot of a seawall, which our building department will typically have. Marie spoke with me today and had a, you know, good suggestion to put something in here that says that the village shall have an annual, you know, cost estimate of what that is. Because
I think we
we've
should.
seen it, our building official and I have seen it many times, right? Where people will come in and say, oh, this is like $32,000, and we're like, put a zero on that. So it is good to,
Yes, no, believe me, I do know,
yeah, to
Yeah,
standardize that.
Zero, yeah.
so, just curious on how you figured all that out.
Yeah. All right, so sorry, got sidetracked there. Shoreline exemption map, so there's our canals. Issue number 6 is revetments. This is pretty similar to bulkheads and seawalls. So the code says that existing revetments may be replaced with a new revetment according to the following regulations. If you're replacing it, 100% of it shall be faced with mangroves and riprap. You're already doing riprap, so of course that's already there. But you still have that same 10% requirement from the bulkheads. It says that an existing riprap that has clean materials can remain and be reinforced with new riprap. So there are some riprap that's got, you know, maybe polluted rocks or something in there. So if it's got unclean materials and doesn't meet some of the criteria, you have to completely remove it and replace it with kind of the clean materials. Again, properties on the shoreline exemption map are exempt. And we also have that same requirement that we put in for bulkheads and seawalls, where we say that if that you shall attempt to utilize living shorelines techniques in lieu of armoring it with a bulkhead or seawall, and of course you have to get a variance to remove the revetment and replace it with a bulkhead or seawall. Film permit process. So this is another one that we don't really have in our code. Right now, you know, there's really nothing in there preventing somebody or preventing us from allowing us to take code enforcement action if someone were to bring dredge or fill and extend their property. So we have a few things in the comp plan that, you know, kind of discourages dredging or filling in mangrove and wetland areas or seagrass beds, and saying that we shall preserve and protect our existing seagrass beds and prohibit the disturbance of sensitive seagrass beds in those 3 different sections. So we don't want someone coming in and kind of doing unpermitted fill work where they could damage our environmental resources. So as I said, we don't have any prohibition on this. We used, or I took what we used in North Palm Beach in this case. We actually had a few people who did this in North Palm Beach. I'm looking at you, Dylan. He claims someone in his neighborhood did it in North Palm Beach, where they had actually come in and you can get things called geotubes now. You can get it's some sort of synthetic material where they will come in and they'll take dredge and fill, put it in a geotube, and then put it on your shoreline, and you can put certain things over it. But it's a kind of a cheap and easy way to extend your property line. But they do that unpermitted, which of course could damage our seagrasses and environmental resources. So we in North Palm, we were actually able to use code enforcement to kind of punish people that did that. Here, without anything in the code, I don't know that we have a way to do that. So we're basically saying that in order to do any kind of fill, you either, you can do it when you're doing the 18 inches waterward of a property for an existing seawall, or if the building official and the community development director, and I believe that you need to do a little bit of fill to create it or maintain a natural shoreline, or a living shoreline. So the fill permit process, it actually has to go to the village council to approve the fill permit. There's public notice, and it goes to the neighbors within 300 feet. I've had a few instances there in North Palm Beach where people would come in and try and extend their property out a little bit for erosion issues, or honestly, some of it was quality of life desires. And the neighbors would typically come out and say, we don't agree to this, why would we ever want this to happen? And the village council would deny it. So I've never actually seen one approved, but it's a good process just to have in place for us to use code enforcement if we ever need to. Variances, so everything that we're creating in this code can apply for a variance. So if someone were to say, I can't do a 10% mangrove on my property because it's gonna obstruct this, the view of the sunset, or any other reason.
That's not valid.
Not a valid reason, but they could try. But if someone had a valid reason, they could come in and seek a zoning variance for anything we're creating in here. So just important to remember that even though we're codifying some stuff, we're creating some new standards, there is always a variance process where people can kind of get it out if something that we're creating isn't allowed. Jupiter's had their code in place since 2015. I've talked to their staff. They had a few little things that they'd like to tweak, which I think I kind of tweaked in our code. But for the most part, they haven't had any real issues or challenges. The North Palm Beach code that we had, some of those elements we used, everything seemed to work really fine. So, all in all, I think it's a good code, but happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, I have plenty.
Dig in, go to town.
Okay, I am looking at Article 4, bulkheads and seawalls. Does the applicant need to have a coastal engineer for the inspection? And when they're submitting the plans, do they need to hire a coast, or should we put that in there? Under bulkheads, under specifications 76-32, I'm sorry.
Okay, what was the question? I'm sorry. Should they have a coastal engineer?
Does the applicant have to have, shouldn't the applicant have a coastal engineer? I'm sorry, I'm married to an engineer, so it's like
Me too.
always. And I went, I looked up ripraps and I ended up on a government engineering website on ripraps that was over 400 pages and everything was archived, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. So, but it's like they're coming to us, but they need they need to be educated a little.
So generally, a lot of these things, like the design of the bulkhead wall shall conform to recognized engineering standards, those typically do require a coastal engineer. If you want to clarify that a coastal engineer shall be sign off on the plans, I don't see any reason why that's an issue, and that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I don't know how the rest of you, but I really feel, this is just, this is one reason why I don't live on the river.
Well, I can say, when you can't do even a repair without an engineer
Mhm.
on
Well,
the wall,
yeah.
or on any of it.
But
You can't present anything.
I know, but it's better to have it in writing. Been there, done that. If it's not in writing,
Yeah,
Not in writing, it didn't happen.
I believe the Florida Building Code requires it for
It does.
bulkheads and seawalls,
well,
but it can never hurt to have it in our
Yeah.
code. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, it's a couple words.
Okay.
They're gonna need a coastal engineer anyways,
Oh,
because they're gonna have to go through DEP or
It's true.
Army Corps
Oh,
permit.
yeah.
Yeah.
They can't just, yeah.
We, on that subject, in North Palm Beach, we actually had a coastal engineer that had to review all of the permits, but we had like a village engineer on retainer already, and he was already, kind of plugged in on things. But the building official and I thought that might be kind of onerous here. We don't really have a village engineer, so we took that requirement out. So we're relying on the building department to kind of double check all of the engineering stuff. Fortunately, it's a strong building department.
Okay. Did we ever hire a code enforcement officer?
We have a new code enforcement officer from Palm Beach Gardens who's
Okay.
doing great.
All right. I'll
Well,
get,
That actually was gonna kind of be my question is, if you had to get outside assistance to evaluate an application, would the fees that you collect from this cover getting that outside assistance, or would this be something that's being, subsidized by people who aren't getting the benefit of that particular review?
That's a great question. That is a great question.
It may be worth looking at the fee that you would charge for something like this if you need an outside expert, like,
especially if they're asking for a variance.
Well, don't they have to hire the
Oh,
engineer
is it an
themselves?
M?
Yeah, I would think they'd have to,
Be their call.
yeah, they would have to.
But why don't you move something like that into
Anyway,
permitting an inspection if you repeated some of that language where the actual costs?
well, we'll get to public comment.
I was just responding to.
Oh, okay, anyway, but they would be required to, wouldn't they be required to hire their own?
So they'll have their own coastal engineers, but I think the question is if the village were to have
If
an
we
actual
had to
coastal
hire-
engineer
yeah.
fact checking their submittal documentation, which I think the building official feels that that's overkill, again, because it's already gone to DEP and because what they're doing has to meet the Florida Building Code. They're competent at kind of checking those things, that it's a little bit overkill, but,
I'm inclined to defer to the building official, I just wanted to raise the
Totally.
question. Okay.
Well,
that's a good question.
it's not a bad idea, okay. All right, now, if you go down to, this is where the 3 feet, section 76 -33, number 2, seawall caps shall extend no farther than 3 feet. That's where I wanted to know, is how are you going to adhere it? I mean, to me, it's like sitting out there.
I'm trying to pull up that other seawall that was in
Because I
here.
was looking and I couldn't, there was no, and if there was an example, I'm like, okay.
I wish I'd provided a better example. So that one, yeah, that one's not out too far. That's probably 2 feet though.
Well, do they adhere it the way that, with the concrete underneath there?
They,
Again, I would think that'd be what the engineer feels has to be done, because it'd have to be secured down in the
I'm just saying,
bedrock and-
I'm being the devil's advocate here because I know how sneaky some people are.
Oh, I know, but we can't determine how that needs to adhere.
But if you need to address something on how it's going to adhere to the wall, you just don't
So-
want it sitting out there because then it's total liability.
yeah, so that would be part of the structural review from the permit.
Okay.
So there will be detailed specifications of seawall construction, the tiebacks, right? So you have to tie the seawall back underneath, how you're gonna drive the sheet piles in. There's a lot of very complicated stuff that's part of that permit. And the structural element of that will be included. And I've seen them, you've probably even seen seawall wet faces out 3 feet, and it's not as big as you think.
Okay.
Well, that would be presented to us in the plans.
Yeah, the building, they would be looking at that, the building department.
Okay, on section 76-34, living shorelines, okay, where it says, when a new bulkhead or seawall is constructed, if allowed by 76-32-6 in parentheses, or an existing bulkhead or seawall is replaced, 100% of the bulkhead But what about the replacement section where there's the mangroves? I mean, how does that get addressed? I mean, what happens to all of they're replacing it and you've got mangroves there?
Oh, you're saying in the future?
Yes.
So bulkheads and seawalls typically live about 40 to 50 years, but when you add living shoreline elements like riprap and mangroves, it extends the life substantially. So I can't say that that bulkhead or seawall would last forever, but it's possibly something that wouldn't even need to be replaced for another 50, 60, 70 years. So I understand the question, but
Okay.
I don't know that it's a situation that will happen anytime in our lifetime.
All right, so I'll leave that for somebody else. We'll be dead
Yeah,
and buried
pass
by
it on
then,
to the future.
hopefully.
Pass it on to the
Your
kids.
grandkids.
Okay, all right, now, on within 2 years of final inspection why are we waiting 2 years?
To allow some grow-in time for the mangroves, so it takes time for them to establish and grow, and that's what Jupiter has done, and they found it to be worthwhile.
But they're already providing us with pictures.
Right. So they should be installing them right away, but there's a kind of a 2-year
Okay.
grow-in period.
Okay, because to me, it's very confusing. I was like, okay, all right.
I agree. It's not the easiest code to read. Or we'll be
Oh,
having
my
having
goodness.
to hold some hands when people come in.
A
But
lot of this is
Okay.
gonna be very difficult unless they do something about the boat speed.
mhm.
I
Well,
can't imagine anything growing in a lot of areas.
well, yeah, that's the other thing.
It's the
And then,
biggest problem.
yeah, if you go down further down in number 3, and it has here, but the minimum requirement of 10% has not been met, village staff may grant a 1-year extension to the, why 1 year? Why not 6 months?
You can make it 6 months.
I mean, I'm not trying to be nasty, but if you make it less, then there's something wrong if it's not growing within 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think a
Boats.
year is too long because they're already supplying you with pictures. And why are you going to get, you give them an extension. How many times do we renew a permit? I wait till we get to the permit stage. Once you get the permit, that's it, no extensions, you're done.
Well, I do hear you completely if they're just being sloppy and lazy. But there could be, you could just plant stuff and then there's a storm 2 months later that
Or a boat,
takes them out.
Yeah, but-
bringing it up.
But they would have pictures to document that, and then
But
that
that-
would be
But then that might be the
reasonable.
reason for the village
But
staff to.
that is to be understood. But I'm saying, but you've got some cases where, it's just 1 year, forget it, but if you give them 6 months, then they will just make sure, I'm not trying to be a very nasty person, but,
Just difficult.
yeah.
Yeah, as long as they're not being just lazy about it and trying to get away with something.
Well, yeah,
then-
because-
Then that would make me mad
Yeah,
and we'd get no
Well,
time.
you've got some people, but, majority of the people are honest, and, I have to believe that.
I mean, you
but-
could even say 2 6-month extensions instead of a year.
Instead of a year, you could break it out that way.
Okay, and then that's it.
Because then if you've done something at 6-month period, you can get the second one. But if you're not doing anything, then you're done.
Well, as long as they've been trying.
Yeah.
If they've
Yeah,
just not done
because you're
anything.
basically creating a relationship with this property owner. You're gonna be on a first-name basis. You might even know their social security number before you're all
I
done.
know that their mothers are
And-
cross-eyed.
But, it's like the monitoring, and you don't have the staff, and as you said, you've got an Excel sheet, but put a lot of the property owner, it's their property.
The good news is, what's that?
I don't have any issue with 2 6-month extensions instead of
No.
a year if that's important to
Yeah.
you.
Because, and then that's it.
as long as they've been trying, you know. if they're-
Yeah,
they're-
But what do you mean that's it? What's gonna happen to them?
you fine them. They go to code enforcement.
You mean you would fine them if the mangroves haven't grown?
Why? Why haven't they, why haven't they
A
grown?
million reasons. I mean, it just.
But if they're documenting it, I sat here and I read this whole, they're documenting it. I mean, and then they turn around, I mean, you know, you document it and you say, okay, this has happened on this day. Okay. So if you have the documentation, I'm not gonna be that nasty of a person and say, okay, you know, I really don't care. But if they're being honest and stuff, but there's like, to me, it's like too much of a but we just don't have the staff.
I mean, fortunately, there's not gonna be a ton of these, right? I would expect there just to be, you know, 1 or 2 a year,
Oh, yeah.
so.
I hope so. That's a lot of money. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Okay, now we'll get down to section 76-36, riprap and mangrove installation. Number 3 says the property owner shall submit a time zero monitoring report to the village. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's my question.
So that's after the inspection has happened on the bulkhead or seawall. They then have to provide the mangrove planting plan to the village, and then they have to submit a photo of what the existing conditions are at that point, so that we know what they're starting from.
And
So that's the start of the clock of that 2-year period. So, and then when that happens, the 2-year period starts, and that's kind of the baseline for where the growth should happen.
And then, you know, you're gonna add that onto your Excel sheet and stuff like that, so that you're monitoring the property owner. Okay.
Are these mangroves actually on their property?
They would be out. They'd be out in
They're in the water.
they'd be out in the waterway.
They're on the waterway.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but it's still up to them to make sure they're growing.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, when they're taking, it's on number 4 of the same section, 76-36. At the end, I have here, we need to have a chart on some of these people so that someone on the staff will be able, I mean, when they submit the pictures, I mean, can you just scan them and put them in the computer on the Excel thing, and then, you know, because it's like, okay, you know, we're monitoring, it's just a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, we'd have a shared folder, and we'd probably create a subfolder for each property, and then have a master sheet tracking it. We'd have to create some internal processes for monitoring it, but again, it's pretty similar to like vacation rentals, which you have to go out and do annual inspections on. Even when there's staff changeover and code enforcement, they're still, you know, having to continue doing those things. So, yeah, well, we'll have to create a process. And honestly, we'll probably if this is adopted, we'll reach out to Jupiter and say, hey, tell us how you've been doing this, and then just kind of copy or mirror what they've been doing. We know their environmental staff, and it should be easy.
well, on number 7, I think it's a really good thing where, you know, the property owner is required, and, you know, there's gonna be a seagrass study, but who's gonna do the seagrass study?
So they'd get an environmental consultant to do that. So you guys didn't see this one permit, but we recently had the dock got a zoning variance at the Seaglass condos. So they provided a seagrass study with that. And it's pretty common if someone's putting a dock out into the waterway, that you'll have to do a seagrass study to make sure that you're not
They're
impacting
probably
anything.
just study seagrass.
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
listening to them for a long time.
Well, and it does-
And with Seaglass, they only had the one dock area across.
Yeah.
But we've lost most of our seagrass
It's
from, again, boat speed.
Yeah, it's a big problem for manatees, obviously.
Huge.
Well, it does say the property owner must submit the
Yeah.
Seagrass
Right.
tanks, or not.
Well, I mean, just asking, well, you know, I mean, they can go out and take pictures or whatever, but are they gonna give you a thing from a biologist or an
It's
expert?
an official report from
Okay.
a licensed
Well, okay.
environmental scientist that they'll actually go out and snorkel or scuba.
Okay, let's go to section 76-44, expiration date renewal. Here's my favorite thing. We're saying that the period is for 2 years from the date thereof. So that's why I'm saying instead of 2 years, a year, but
It's fine. Yeah, no problem.
you know, because they should have, and then on number B, the renewal of the permit prior to 60 days after its expiration. How many renewals shouldn't we just limit the amount of renewals for a permit? I mean, enough is enough.
And remember, we probably won't even see one granted for this.
Well, I understand that, but, you know, I mean, to me, you know, I'm sitting there last night and I'm like, okay, now if a hurricane comes and destroys, you know, everything is out, you know, we're not even gonna look at this ordinance because you've got people that are rebuilding, but you've got some people, I mean, that will just keep coming in, and I'm sure in the building department, they keep coming in asking for a renewal of their permit, and they didn't do anything. I mean, I'm looking at the house across the street from me for 7 months now under construction. I'm ready to go in and put up a wall. You know, I think we should just say to them that only 2 renewals, I mean, 1 renewal.
I mean, I wouldn't want to limit renewals or permits. We live in a hurricane-prone area.
Yeah, but
like, I just-
to me, if you've got a hurricane, all bets are off. You're talking totally, I mean, after Hurricane Andrew, you couldn't get a contractor up here.
I know, but these rules will still apply if they're
still
replacing.
on the books.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
We have tropical storms, we have just
Yeah,
regular storms.
But
Not
they
even
could come in
hurricane.
for a variance and I would approve it. I mean, because of the circumstances, but you've got people that will just keep asking for a
You mean
permit.
they do parts
re-
of their construction?
Yeah.
Is that what they're doing, just bits and pieces?
Yeah,
so your issues with people who start and don't finish their work, not with the actually having the permit renewed.
yeah. I mean, you know, really, or do you have a criteria for, does somebody actually go out before you renew a permit? Do you physically go out and see whether they've done anything? I'm just asking.
Say that again, Liz, if they renew
Before
it-
you renew a permit, does somebody physically check it to see if they've done anything before you renew a permit?
Perhaps they haven't, that's why they're renewing it.
Or how does revoking the permit mid-job address the issue that you fundamentally have with construction that takes too long?
The other dirty secret on permit renewal in Florida is that there's an emergency order in effect pretty much at all times. I see Jared nod his head. So someone can, it's very easy to get any permit in Florida extended because there's an emergency order in effect at all times. Zika virus, coronavirus, economic recession, I mean,
Run out of money.
hurricane, in any
I
hurricane.
ran out of money because the
That would be
insurance
good.
companies are just.
Yeah, the insurance crisis, I mean, and the construction industry in Florida lobbies the state and the governor to always have an emergency order in effect.
Yeah.
So all they have to do is file a request that way, and it just automatically gets renewed.
Well,
It's a dirty secret.
I would like to always see if there's options, because you see them on TV, there's too many horror stories about bad construction having to be redone. Your
Yes.
construction person just
Oh,
does.
that's happened to me,
Quits, doesn't even show up, now you've gotta find somebody new, or they can't get all the rocks for the riprap, they can't, you know.
But if
it's-
you have that,
There
I
can be
mean,
those problems.
you know, that's a viable excuse, not an excuse,
Yes.
but that's viable because of what's happening. But in the meantime, Liz, you know, that you're gonna have people that abuse, I mean,
Well, yes, but I agree, if people have
People are
done
gonna
nothing,
use
then,
everything.
Yeah.
then as far as I'm concerned, hold their feet
So-
to the fire. But,
I
you know,
think
you do
there's
have to
just so
have
much we
options
can do.
available for people where there are legitimate.
or put something there that,
Problems.
you know, on how many renewals.
And this is for what, seawalls and,
This is for the fill permit
For the
process.
fill
For the
permit,
fill,
okay.
for 7640.
you know, not houses, but just the
No,
fill
it's-
permit?
yeah.
Okay.
Say one time, could be granted one time.
What happens if someone needs a second and you've put in one time?
Yeah.
I don't know that I feel it's
Well, I would
necessary.
just say twice, and then,
Then what?
Well, all of this says they have to show good cause.
Yes.
yeah,
If
if
they're
you show
just
good-
not gonna do it because they feel like it, they have to show good cause for
Thank
it.
you.
So therefore, that is
says
what
what good
drives
cause is?
this.
What's good cause though?
Well, the building department, that's their,
well, you
Yeah.
know, you have a hurricane. That's good cause.
That's a good cause.
Your contractor went out of business.
But again,
That's a good cause.
that's
you
just
lost
it.
your
Yeah.
job and couldn't continue to do it that year?
Well,
I
that's a good, I mean, there's,
But who's to say what a good cause is? You think it's really happening that much, but maybe not.
well, I
Well,
don't
and this
know.
probably won't happen. You know,
No.
it's just there, but
I'm just bringing things up.
You certainly are.
Well, I'm sorry. My mind was in overload.
This was a very big homework assignment, Jen.
yes,
I
it was.
apologize. I apologize.
Well,
Yikes.
but you know, what, I mean, it really gets you to think that, you know, like, at the end of this, I'm like, you know, we should have had like a workshop with the village council, us and the environmental, and had a structural engineer, a coastal engineer, just give us the whole education and, you know, well, when you were
It's too
doing
much.
all of these ordinance, doing this down, I mean, do people abuse this? I mean, I'm just, you know,
Well, the fill permit process, like I said, I've never seen one approved. It's really kind of put in place to prevent people from illegally filling property. And if you don't have it, I think it makes it tough to actually enforce things. Because the problem is, so DEP would have jurisdiction over the Loxahatchee, and Army Corps would have jurisdiction over the intercoastal, Indian River Lagoon, sorry. But they don't always take action. So the instances I said where we had problems in North Palm Beach, we went to the DEP and said, hey, these people are illegally dredging the Ermine River. Go get them. And DEP would say,
really?
sorry, we got other stuff going on. So, I mean, it's pulling teeth to get DEP to do something. So it's good to just to have these in place so that you can enforce issues that come up. But I've never seen one granted, and I mean, the criteria you see there, it's pretty tough to even
Yes,
get
it
one
is,
granted.
yeah.
So this is kind of just a process that's in place to prevent people from doing it, rather than to actually ever even issue a permit.
It's there to prevent the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it's not said or stated, if the code is silent to the issue, then you have no standing.
Correct.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm done.
Are you okay?
I mean, I need to tell you, I had 2 glasses of wine after this. 'Cause it
Well,
was,
and-
You can tell by your notes.
you can tell by my
You
notes.
can tell by those notes.
And Liz and board, I'll also say, like, this isn't like a extremely time-sensitive thing, so if you guys want to bring it back, you know, at the next meeting, more than welcome to.
Can you do that with, like, with everything, and then we can,
Yeah,
Have to?
yeah, you could, you could vote to bring it back, at a future hearing.
wine.
I know you guys want to discuss this again, right?
well, I would just like to see, I mean, you said that Marie made suggestions, Leslie, I mean, I've done, I don't know if anybody else, but I mean, just to see a finished I mean, yeah, I would like to have it come back, and so I can get the feel of the land.
What's changed? I think there was one minor
change
change.
anything?
Yeah.
Well, no, there
What
was
did we
several.
change? we talked, but I don't remember a change.
Well, Leslie brought stuff up.
One, item one is the recouping of the village's planning costs.
But you said your
Yes.
building officials were confident that that was addressed, so I don't think there's a change.
All right. That's fine. You don't have to bring it back. I'll save this forever.
Well, there might still be public comment, I would guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
we do have public comment, yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Sorry I
Okay,
took
any
so
more
long.
board comment? No,
I
okay.
think they were afraid to say anything after me having the floor for so
Okay.
long.
We are.
Okay, we're closing board comment. We'll open the floor to public comment. Meg?
Ms. Pat Watkins, 167 River
Miss-
Drive.
Mrs. Watkins, if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Pat Watkins, 167 River Drive, that's Lot 45 in Tequesta Country Club. My husband and I have lived in the village since 1982, and that's when we also purchased that lot. Ours is one of the very few unbulkheaded lots on the northwest fork of the Loxahatchee in the country club. So my first concern here is obviously, I have a concern about notification of these meetings and its subject matter. Having been a longtime resident, former council member, former mayor, I attend a lot of council meetings, workshops. I was unaware of the discussion of this, even though it's noted you had workshops on the subject. Now, that's my bad if I didn't
No,
see it.
The council did.
Okay, yeah, but
Yes,
still,
council.
just the subject matter, I mean. I would have missed this meeting if it hadn't been brought to my attention by a friend, okay? So I'm questioning whether notices are sent out to the property owners who might be affected by this discussion or any recommendations you make to council. Is it only when a permit is applied for that the 300-foot notification process kicks in, which is possible? With the large amount of turnover and reconstruction going on in my neighborhood, I find it hard to believe that we don't have property owners that would be very interested in what's being discussed and possibly proposed in this ordinance. Back in 2006, and I believe it was Hurricane Wilma because it came from the west, okay? Our lot was impacted because our neighbor had a jet ski moored at her dock, which broke loose.
Oh,
That the wave action in the river during that storm was unbelievable.
wow.
That jet ski acted like a battering ram and ate out quite a bit of our lot. Fortunately, at the time, we contacted the village, who told us to contact DEP. We were issued an emergency shoreline stabilization permit, and we were allowed to fill it within certain specifications, obviously, to replace that. I'm questioning whether or not we would be able to accommodate such a circumstance under this ordinance, since it's already happened to us once. And would we be permitting it through the village, DEP, both, and others, whatever, I don't know. In that my questions are specific to our property, I understand that I will look for a meeting with Mr. Hutch about that and how it affects us personally. However, I'm really concerned that not enough notification or information is out in the public about what's being discussed here that affects every waterfront property within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins.
Thank you.
And to that point, that's a great point you raised, Ms. Watkins. We would not legally be required to notify every waterfront property owner, but we certainly could have probably done a better job putting stuff out in the weekly newsletter and social media, kind of advertising that this is up for discussion. And we certainly could do that if it comes back for another meeting, or if it goes to the village council. We'll put some more information out and then put kind of a summary of what the major code changes are.
And I didn't know about this until last month myself, so.
I didn't know about the workshop. When was it, last summer?
They initially had one in, I think it was May of '23, with Lynn Britt, who used to work in the building department. And then there was a follow-up in January with council, a follow-up discussion presentation. I gave a similar presentation to what I did tonight without the code recommendations.
Okay.
Well, because I was shocked when this came up last month. I
Mhm.
didn't know.
Mhm.
Didn't know about the workshop. I would have been there.
Okay, Meg, any more?
Marisa Theory.
Marie, if you state your name and address for the record, please.
Marie Superi, I live in the country club. I'm generally in support of this ordinance, and I think that we're moving forward on this on the well-founded understanding that living shorelines are better for everybody, both individual properties and the community. I have a few areas where I would recommend some changes. The first one is section 76-32, when we're talking about disturbed shorelines. I've spoken, Jay mentioned this earlier. We don't have a definition for that, and I think that it's probably fair to assume that most of our shorelines would be classified as disturbed. So I think we should add some language here to the effect that disturbed shorelines where there is proof that a bulkhead is necessary to protect the property, so that we're not getting into an argument with the property owners about whether their shoreline is disturbed or not. The second point I have is on page 3 of the ordinance, section 76-33, the minimum design requirements for seal walls. This is the total cost of the repairs is less than 50% of the replacement cost. Jay also mentioned this, and I think we should add here, the village shall refer to an annual estimate of seawall cost per linear feet in deciding making sure that the replacement costs that we have are a reasonable one, so we don't have any monkeying with the numbers. And then I have 2.5 based on what we were discussing before. In subsection 2 in that same section, the seawall caps not extending further than 3 feet. I think there might be concern there about light obstruction for the seagrass underneath to the extent that there is any. And I think we should probably look into that to make sure that we're not giving people the ability to kill seagrass since the light won't go through whatever the decking would be. So I would recommend a change there to make sure that there's no seagrass affected there, and if that requires a seagrass study, we might need to require that there. On page 4, in the same section, in subsection 4, the last sentence says the building official may require the modification of plans when it is determined that seawall caps and/or retaining walls will lead to erosion or the degradation of adjacent properties. I would strongly recommend changing may to shall, because this is a situation where we should not be, neighbors shouldn't have to bear any costs here. There should be no erosion that anybody is imposing on their neighbors or degradation of their adjacent properties. So I'm confident that our current building official would make sure that that didn't happen, but we don't want wishy-washy language in the statute here.
That makes sense.
It does.
So the fourth one is skipping to page 9 of the ordinance. This is section 76-37 and subsection 2 in the inspection. It says at least 48 hours for the building inspector. And if I have one more point after this, if I could just have a few more seconds.
Sure.
Okay, so this is 48 hours. My concern here is holiday weekends. If you have a holiday weekend, and I don't want our building inspector to be blindsided or to have to come, necessarily have to work on a holiday weekend. So if somebody drops something on them on Saturday and they want to start on Monday, I think we might be able to make it business
days.
hours so that they can't drop something on them on the weekend. And my last point, number 5, on page 11, this is in section 76-42, subsection B3. And this is where the village council is considering a fill permit. I think we should strike the word material. It says whether any material injury or monetary damage to adjoining land will accrue from the proposed activities. And the rationale for this is that, again, we should not be imposing any injury or costs on neighbors. So we don't want to be in a situation where we're deciding whether the costs being imposed on neighbors are material or not. So any injury is enough to make this something that should not be granted.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's all I have. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Meg, is anybody?
No further comment.
Okay, we're closing the floor to public comment, and what considerations would you like to attach?
Jay, can you, on what Marie just said under the application, make her change and strike material injury?
Can we do that without a
Can you do that?
recommendation? I think
But that is part of.
It's application issuance, it's 7642, and then the other one, hold on.
The material.
It's under, whether any material injury, just strike out material and just have whether any injury or monetary damage.
What other injury are we thinking?
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
She's a lawyer.
material,
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Briefly.
I don't want a neighbor who has some impact of erosion or something that they're going to have a cost imposed on them, even if it's losing some of their shrubs or even if it seems small, right? I mean, like, say they have a hedge
No,
and they
yeah,
lose
it
one
makes
of them,
sense.
If you agree
that
to it,
you shouldn't
Yeah.
be able to impose on your neighbors. I mean, if we're in this situation, I mean, hopefully most people, we won't get there because most people will behave so or make their plans so that they're not imposing any costs on their neighbors or being disruptive. But if we're in this situation, we might have that. And I don't think it's fair to put a neighbor in the situation of having to argue that their injury is material. That's what I'm trying to avoid here.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Dylan just pointed out that a couple of those are just like one-word changes. If I'm agreeable to it, that I can just do it without even being part of your recommendation. So the part where
Okay.
removing material injury, changing may with shall,
And then
Yeah.
and
the
bi- and
48
the
hours.
48 business hours, those are
Hours.
things that we can just put in as like
Because
staff
that
updates.
all
Now, by
makes
business
a
hours,
lot
Makes
of good
But
sense.
48 business hours, that's like 8 hours and 8 hours and 8 hours, or
Well,
2 business days?
Oh,
Two
yeah, it's
business
2
days
business
would be
days.
fine.
Yeah,
We'll
I
do
would
2
just
business
visit.
days.
All right,
Okay.
yeah, 2
Smart.
business days.
Okay, so those 3 things, but we're not gonna, those will not be a condition.
Those we can just
No.
do administratively. The other
Okay.
suggestions she had and that you've discussed are things that would have to be part of the recommendation.
Okay.
And what did I discuss?
We did discuss,
Yeah.
the.
6 months?
Conditional, right,
Yeah,
six,
yeah,
six,
two
2
6
6 months instead of
Yeah,
of
all
1
right.
year.
And
that
her
was-
And
first
that's
one,
under the living shoreline? Wait, hold on, wait, that's the renewal.
Yes, under the renewals.
Oh, yeah,
Find that.
It's
Did
for
we,
the-
did we
the
discuss
mangrove,
that?
isn't it?
Yeah,
Exemption.
is that?
Yeah, for growing the mangroves,
So we're gonna do the 2,
6 months
6
instead of
months
1, instead of 1
Yes.
year.
So it's 7634-3.
okay, hold on, 76,
34,
34, 3,
And then was
okay.
Marie's first point, was that for
It will be 6 months. Okay, and then the other one is under 7644. And we decided that we would do 2,
Shall be valid for a period of 2 years.
yeah, but 2 60-day renewals for expert, 2, what did we say? Renewal of any
I don't think you guys ever came to an agreement on that
I
one.
don't
Because
think,
every-
but I think one of Marie's first points, was that covered already in what was done? No? I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember
could
which
you
one it
please-
was.
Marie's first point, you can go, sorry.
My first point was on section 76-32. In the first line, bulkheads and seawalls shall be permitted only to stabilize disturbed shorelines. And my suggestion is to add where there's proof that a bulkhead is necessary to protect the property, so that we don't have to get into a discussion with the applicants as to whether their shoreline is disturbed or not, if they can prove it to us that their property needs.
Is it also
Right.
administratively possible?
Is that administrative?
So that's actually, that's part of what's in 7632-6, where they have to prove, they would have to get a zoning variance.
Right.
So what you could do is, because I think in that section, you guys were already going to make a recommendation that the building official and community development director have to make a recommendation. So my recommendation would be to say something like,
Oh, Dylan,
the-
take notes.
I'm
all right, I'm on the fly here.
Building official
in the event that a property owner applies to stabilize a riprap or natural shoreline with a bulkhead or seawall, the property owner shall demonstrate that the shoreline is degraded and needs to be stabilized. I'm struggling here.
Maybe
No,
just
but it
need for
sounds right.
stabilization, then you don't
Yeah,
have to disturb
No,
the grader.
you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something along those lines,
Yeah.
and that the building official and community development director shall provide a written opinion
Yes.
with the zoning variance
Well,
application.
and
Yeah,
the
that's it.
history, like the history of the
If
property.
I could, one slight amendment I'd make to that is that that's the best option too, the bulkhead, because the best option is to find the best way to make the living shoreline work.
Right, yes.
So that, I would like to make sure that we've got, that's the best, and I know since if we're putting it in your hands, that will be the case, but I like to have it in the statute too.
Well,
And their
we'll do a
recommendations.
compromise.
Okay. And
I have I have faith in you that you, I mean, with the verbiage.
Yeah, we can wordsmith that, if that's
Okay,
the
no.
general gist of what you want to do.
Yes.
We'll wordsmith it, the
Yeah, they need to
recommendation.
have some sort of report showing that it's irreparably damaged and this is their only option.
Yep, I'll work,
And then we would still have to make that decision, yes.
Agreed.
I mean, through the planning and zoning variance.
Yeah.
And,
And we just love variances.
okay, now that's.
Okay, so then we're back to 76-34-3 is the 6 months. And then we're back to the 76-44 where I said how many renewals.
Well, that one, I kind of would like to leave that up to the building department because there's just too many variables and just like Ms. Watkins, she had to have an emergency fill, but then, you know, it might have taken her a long time to get somebody to come and fill it. There just needs to be
Yeah.
those options when it's not their fault, you know, when it's.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, you're gonna have instances where it's not.
Well, it does say for good cause, that all renewals have to be for good cause.
Well, then I think we should define good cause.
But we
Oh,
can't.
I don't
We
know.
can't.
We can't.
Because
I
that
know
would
we
not be
can't.
There's just too many.
There's
yes.
too many variables.
There's too many
Okay.
variables, right.
All right,
I mean, we have to have faith in the
I'll
building department.
compromise.
Okay.
Okay, I will compromise
Okay.
on that. So then it's just for the motion for 76-34-3 to make that change on, in line, on, number 3, that the staff may grant a 6-month extension to the monitoring period. And
Marie?
that's,
Before you make your motion, the other one was the total 50% defining what replacement cost as the
Oh,
estimated linear feet. I think that's good to have in there for the village's protection, so we don't have a
Say that again,
unscrupulous.
Howell.
So in section 76-33, the comparison of the total cost of the repairs being
Right.
to the replacement cost, since the replacement cost, we don't want to leave it solely in the hands of the contractors as to what the replacement cost is, to define that it's going to be with
Okay.
reference to an estimated linear square feet that the building official will apply. So there's a bright line there
Okay.
for
Yeah, but
everybody to
staff get to
reference.
determine what a reasonable cost is.
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
yes.
And we would have it on an annual basis, so then it's not even up for dispute. We say, this is our number, and there's
And then everybody
no,
knows.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
It'll
yeah,
be much
I'm good
easier.
with that. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so
Just
these
add
are
that.
all administrative or conditions?
I would make that one part of the condition, the recommendation, because it's a little bit longer.
Okay, the annual estimate one.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Okay.
annual estimate,
And Dylan's gonna,
Can I jump in? I hate to throw another
Yes.
wrench into things.
please, go ahead.
Ms. Watkins brought up a great point. Do we want to create a little small subsection in the fill permit that allows people to do an emergency permit in the event of a storm? So we could just create a subsection that says, in the event of a hurricane or storm, an emergency
hey,
shoreline stabilization can be applied for, and so it could either go to council or maybe even the building official and staff approve it.
Because,
Well,
I mean,
yes.
time is of the essence
Because
at
it
that
could be
point.
further damaged if you don't,
Yes,
if you don't
if
act
it's not
quickly.
taken care of.
Right.
And that still has DEP approval first, right? Or does it not
For
in
the
the
emergency-
case of an emergency?
I don't know.
For an
I'm not-
emergency,
I don't know
mean,
what their procedures are. I don't know.
You got an emergency.
You did it through the DEP.
Oh.
Something or other, I know it went through DEP.
But
You don't want someone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
okay.
DEP approves it in an emergency basis, I would say we do. Otherwise, you're gonna have people after storms, you know, sort of like price gougers, right? Taking advantage of a storm. Oh, emergency, I have to replenish my beach, right? Like, I would be cautious that there's, I know we wouldn't approve it, but the burden of that happening may be an issue. I don't know. I like where you're going with it. Like, I think there should be something for after storm conditions.
You just need the right wording.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would want to establish a new subsection regarding emergency.
But
Permit
has,
application.
I mean,
Permit
I'm
application,
surprised that, I mean, some of the other municipalities haven't thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, you consider how long the town of Jupiter's had this on their books.
Are we sure they
We haven't
don't
had
have?
major.
We luckily haven't had a major
Yeah.
storm. I mean,
Six
Well,
months.
yeah, well,
2015.
Yeah, knocking on
where's
all
the
the wood.
wood? Okay.
Wait a minute,
But-
can I just?
Can I have Marie, sorry, one thought on that is that especially for the fill for living shorelines that are natural ones,
Right.
I would make sure it's aimed at those, that they get the emergency, because if you've got a bulkhead,
yes.
then you don't need the fill.
Well, that's a
Right,
whole
right.
different
Like, the
ballgame.
whole
She
idea
doesn't
is,
have that.
no, I know, that's why
But
I'm saying
that's why
aim this
we're
language
addressing
for
her
emission.
individually,
Right,
not
but
the
I would
other.
carve it out so that the bulkhead and seawall ones are not able to apply for the emergency, because unless there's a reason that
Well-
needs to. So maybe for stabilizing their mangroves, if they've got riprap, but just putting fill in, I think could lead to some,
Yeah, that's,
potentially, some
Well,
areas
I'm
we don't.
sure
wanna
he's
go.
got the brains to figure that out.
I don't know.
No, but it also would prevent, if we
You
have
guys
it
see
in the
this ordinance?
statute,
Okay.
nobody's coming to you.
Trust you.
I think if we had it in the statute that it was to, for those purposes, reinforcing the actual living shorelines and reinforcing the mangroves, then nobody's coming to you with a questionable thing that you have to, I mean,
Yeah.
we also want to lessen the burden on our staff
Yeah.
in the aftermath
Well,
of the
yeah,
storm.
I mean-
So if it's in black and white that says, only if you've got a natural
Makes sense.
shoreline, or you
Or
need it
stabilize
to
the
stabilize your
mangroves.
mangroves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
define
Just to make it easier.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now we're
Okay.
going to do an emergency, you want a
A new
subsection?
subsection
Yes.
to
That's a good idea, though. Yeah.
allow for
But only-
emergency.
Subsection, addressing emergency, hold on, emergency fill, and then you can fill in the rest,
for
right?
natural.
For natural shoreline or to. or
Hold
to
on, emergency fill for natural,
Shoreline.
Poor Meg.
Or, does
What's
it
that?
have to be?
The minutes, you're gonna have fun with
Or
these.
to,
huh?
I'm going.
or to stabilize mangroves.
She's got nice tidy writing, though, so.
Right, okay. And,
So the emergency is only for the natural shoreline.
Right.
or to stabilize mangroves.
Okay, so now now all of the others, so it's the 6 months we need, you need a motion for, and then it's the emergency and the
A
other
new
things.
subsection, yeah.
Dylan,
So, been a lot of changes on this one. I'll do my best, and you can tell me if I'm missing something. We have the 2 6-month review period extensions instead of the 1 year in 7634-3. We have instructions to clarify the definition of disturbed shorelines and to have an option for, or to direct the planning director and building official to provide a written recommendation regarding whether they believe it qualifies as a disturbed shoreline. We have defining the total cost of repairs is based upon an estimate based on lineal feet on an annual basis that will be based upon a chart kept on the Office of the Community Development Director. And we have been directed to consider or to add a provision relating to extensions in the event of an emergency storm event, specifically for natural shorelines, not for standard,
Or to stabilize mangrove.
or to stabilize mangroves.
Okay.
Those are the recommendations that I've written down so far.
And that's my motion.
Okay, if you'll,
Don't ask me to repeat it.
okay, if you'll at least make a proper motion.
But Dylan just read, that's my motion for approval.
Does anyone second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have,
A first and a second.
so regarding ordinance 08-24, including the conditions or recommendations. Okay, and then this is for, to recommend approval.
Right.
This motion is to recommend approval. All in
With
favor?
the changes, yeah.
With the
Changes.
conditions that
Right.
yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion passes.
Sorry to put you through that, but really good feedback. Thank you all.
Okay.
I do have to
Yeah.
say, it's, I mean, my hat goes off to you, because it's a lot of work. I mean,
I'm sure there'll be more changes and,
well,
Yeah,
I'm
but
sure.
what a start. I mean,
yeah, at least we have something. That's what's important.
I mean-
so. Okay, and a motion to adjourn?
Well,
Oh,
quick,
no,
just a
sorry.
quick staff update. I think, knock on wood, we're gonna probably not have a meeting in August. So you guys earned a month off. Can't guarantee it, but I think
I
Think-
think that, you know why? Because my grandson is playing in the Panther Stadium for his high school. The, Wellington High School is the state champs for football, and he's playing at, Wellington High School is playing in the Panther Stadium, and he says, Grandma, you better get up here. So, and that happens to be the third Thursday. So, okay. Thank you, Jay, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you so much.
Okay, and
Is there any other
That
public
was it.
comments? No, we can't adjourn, we didn't ask for public comments.
okay.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Oh, but I mean,
No.
if we're done with staff comments and everything.
Okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second
We
that.
adjourned already.
You need a motion.
We did.
We did, okay.
All right, let's call for a vote on this motion to adjourn. I'll call it. All in
All
favor?
in favor? All
Any opposed?
Okay, we are adjourned.
Okay.
Tell it's been a long.
Oh, Lord.